Sophia Langley stared at the golden city lights shimmering against the evening sky through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan office. Her reflection looked back at her emerald green eyes revealing her fatigue, her auburn hair styled nicely in a fitted black pantsuit. The resources used for the presentation were perfect. Her colleague Jessica smiled approvingly and remarked, "The client was absolutely thrilled." Though it fell short of her eyes, Sophia smiled back. "That's fantastic. However, I have to go right now since I have to go to my sister's baby shower." Sophia let out a long breath as she got into her fancy vehicle. Her family, particularly her parents, Charles and Margaret Langley, had never placed much value on professional achievement. In their society, which was based on social norms and old money, a woman's value was determined by her capacity to find a spouse and have children rather than by her professional accomplishments. Sophia's father would frequently nod toward Sophia's younger sister and remark, "Emily made the wiser choice." Emily had taken the conventional route, marrying Daniel Whitmore, a banker, right out of college and becoming a dedicated housewife. She was now expecting her first child, which was the Langley family's ideal situation. Despite her accomplishments, Sophia, a formidable marketing professional, remained single and childless, which was disappointing. Sophia's thoughts strayed to the past as she made her way across the city. She had also engaged 2 years earlier. Her fiancé, Nathan Carter, was a promising real estate developer. At last, her parents appeared content with her, thinking she had ensured a future consistent with their values. Nathan abruptly called off the engagement. No justification, no resolution. Emily had hurried into marriage with Daniel just a few months later. She kept thinking about her mother's remarks. "Why do you always fail?" Learn from Emily, everything she does works out perfectly. Sophia's chest constricted as she halted and pressed her forehead against the driving wheel. She had struggled since she was a young girl to live up to her family's expectations by doing well in school, receiving honors, and moving up the corporate ladder, but it had never been enough. She had always been outshone by Emily, who was naturally charming and always the golden kid. Her phone rang. The name Emily appeared on the screen. "Where are you, Sophia?" "It's beginning," Emily said with her customary impatience. "I warned you not to arrive late." Sophia answered in a neutral tone. "I'm on my way. You and your job. It's a family gathering. Act quickly." The phone hung up. Sophia slowed her car close to the entrance of a high-end hotel as she got closer to Emily's wealthy area. The scene before her made her breath catch in her throat. Emily was involved in a passionate embrace with a man while she was significantly pregnant. Not just any man, Carter Nathan, her ex-fiancé. Sophia gripped the steering wheel tighter as she watched them kiss for a long time before they drove away, Nathan going in the other direction and Emily heading toward their parents' house. She was filled with nausea. The parts of the puzzle fit together perfectly. Nathan experienced an abrupt separation. Emily had entered into a hasty union, and now there was the unimaginable chance that Emily's unborn child might not be Daniel's. Once more, her phone buzzed. It was Emily's message. "Act quickly. Everybody is waiting." Sophia took a deep breath, her hands shaking a little as she took in the treachery. Then, however, something changed. Rather than giving in to heartache, she experienced a wave of cold resolve. She reached for her laptop and began to piece together digital breadcrumbs she had previously missed by scrolling through old emails and messages. She was about to benefit greatly from a skill she had developed throughout her undergraduate years: hacking. "I need proof." She dialed a number and decided to postpone going to the baby shower. A calm voice said, "Diana Morrison Law Office. I have a complicated family matter that needs your help." Experienced lawyer Diana listened intently, then answered, "I get it. We will want substantial proof if we are to take action." Sophia's lips curved into a slow, determined smile. "I might arrive at the baby shower a bit late." She felt in charge for the first time in years, and she was going to put it to use. A few ways from her parents' mansion, Sophia Langley parked her vehicle. Usually, she would pull directly into the circular driveway, where she would be greeted with courteous but aloof grins. But tonight, she didn't want to enter those opulent double doors under false pretenses. It had always seemed more like a museum than a home, the graceful Langley estate, a representation of ancient money and prestige. Numerous family photographs covered the walls inside, but Sophia had long observed that she was never in the center or the center of attention, but rather always at the periphery. As she checked the folder of evidence she had gathered over the previous hour, she inhaled deeply. Evidence indicated Emily and Nathan had been together long before Sophia's engagement was over, including screenshots of emails, texts, and hotel receipts. However, a series of recent messages between them that alluded to the true paternity of Emily's unborn child was the most incriminating piece of evidence. "The baby will look like you. I just know it." Nathan's remarks. "Just 3 days ago, I typed." She clenched her fingers around the folder. "They believe they have triumphed. I'll simply accept my position in the background and smile. Not now." The sound of laughter poured through the imposing double doors as she arrived at the entryway. The celebration had already begun. She could see people carrying champagne flutes and having easy, animated discussions through the wide windows. She heard her mother's voice, which was dismissive and cutting, just as she was ready to enter. "She hasn't arrived yet?" Margaret Langley spoke in a disapproving tone. Always focusing on her work, her father, Charles, sneered. "She truly has no idea how important family is." Sophia tightened her hold on the door handle. Emily said in a silky voice. "Well, that's just Sophia. She has always stood out from the crowd." That's why Nathan, as though catching herself, she hesitated. Sophia felt a knot in her stomach. Her mother then gave a small laugh. "Oh, don't get that started. She doesn't handle failure." Well, as you are aware, failure, the word cut like a razor through Sophia. "Anyway," Emily added in a phony, beautiful voice, "to my ideal small family, let's raise a glass." There was a clinking of glasses and a wave of applause. Sophia stood motionless for a long time. She had always been perceived as an outsider in her own family. However, it seemed like a slap in the face to hear them so blatantly affirm it the same evening that they had cut her out of their real conversations. Her mother's words resonated with her deeply. Her father's contempt was evident in his words. Emily's arrogance. Everything was so predictable. However, they were the ones who would be caught off guard tonight. Sophia brushed the sting away, straightened her black silk top, and stepped inside after calming down. Heads turned as soon as she stepped inside. Margaret was the first to notice her, a tight-lipped smile masking her earlier statements. "Oh, Sophia!" At last. Emily's nicely formed brow furrowed as she stood beside the enormous fireplace. "We wanted to know if you would make it." Sophia slipped her eyes toward Emily's plump abdomen and said, "I got caught up." Her sister's eyes flickered with something, maybe apprehension. Emily taunted, "Oh, well, we know how much you love your work. Yet family is obviously the most important thing." Sophia refrained from hurling her wineglass at her sister, instead choosing to grin. Rather, she allowed her gaze to wander over the pricey champagne, the nicely prepared charcuterie trays, and the extravagant decorations. It was all a performance, similar to Emily's life. They resembled a well-maintained image of their parents. "Come," Emily said, pointing to the big dining table where people were starting to assemble. "I reserved a seat for you." Sophia sat down, observing that Emily had taken the head of the table, and Daniel, the unwitting husband, was sitting next to her. Naturally, Nathan was nowhere to be seen. Coward. There was a lot of laughter and light chat as the dinner started. Sophia cooperated by responding to inquiries about her job, avoiding scathing comments from her parents over her single status, and courteously nodding in agreement with Emily's theatrical shows of love for Daniel. However, Emily tapped her glass when the dessert was being brought. "Everyone," she said with a smile, "I just want to say a few words before we finish." "Yes, I'm sure you do." Sophia waited while sipping her wine. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand and added, "I just want to thank my incredible husband. He has supported me during this pregnancy, and I am so excited to begin this new chapter in our lives together." Daniel grinned, oblivious to the maelstrom that was building all around him. Emily turned to her parents and said, "Of course, to Mom and Dad, who have always been the epitome of loyalty, love, and family, devotion." Sophia almost burst out laughing. She saw the image of a loving wife and soon-to-be mother as Emily's palm passed over her belly. Emily's eyes then strayed to Sophia. "And to my sister," she said, her smile gradually expanding. "I sincerely hope you find the same level of happiness that I do, Sophia, even though I know we don't always agree." Some of the guests laughed. Sophia put down her glass of wine. She leaned forward slowly and deliberately. With a silky voice, she remarked, "Emily, that was a lovely speech. However, I only have one query." Emily's face wavered just a little. "Oh?" Sophia waited until there was a brief pause before continuing. "Is Daniel aware that Nathan could be your child's father?" The whole room fell silent. On a plate, a fork clattered. Someone took a deep breath. Emily's face lost its color. Her voice was a pathetic attempt at assurance as she stammered, I don't know what you're talking about." Sophia shook her head, allowing the moment to linger. Then she retrieved a well-prepared envelope from her bag and slipped it across the table in Daniel's direction. "How about you open it and see?" Daniel paused, looking from Sophia to Emily, whose whole body had tensed up. "What is this?" he asked gently. Sophia crossed her arms and leaned back. "Verify." Emily leaped from her chair. "You're ruining my baby shower." Sophia merely arched an eyebrow. "I believe you were the one who ruined it." The atmosphere was oppressively tense. Margaret extended her arm towards Emily, hoping to salvage the situation. "My dear, let's avoid touching me." Emily's voice cracked as she snapped. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she turned back to Sophia. "You're resentful enough." Daniel's voice sliced like a scalpel through the confusion. He picked up the envelope slowly. He took out the pictures with trembling hands. The emails, the invoices, the reality. He just looked at them for a long time. He then turned to face his wife, Emily, his loyal, ideal wife, a woman who had cheated on him in the most heinous manner. Over the table, a long, heavy quiet descended. Daniel then asked in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper, "Is that accurate?" Sophia didn't hold out for the response. She had fulfilled her destiny. One idea crossed her thoughts as she got up from her chair. "They didn't anticipate me." The stillness dragged on, oppressive and impenetrable. Daniel's knuckles turned white as his fingers clenched around the damning paperwork. Now, the dining room's warmth, the polished cutlery, the shimmering chandeliers, and the aroma of vanilla candles felt incredibly manufactured, like a meticulously prepared set for a play that had just gone horribly wrong. Emily stood motionless across the table, her face pallid, her lips slightly agape, as though she was frantically trying to come up with a denial, an explanation, anything. "Sophia," she said in a shaky, brittle, and strained voice, this is a miscommunication." Sophia faked astonishment by raising an eyebrow. "Oh, so you won't mind giving an explanation?" At last, Daniel wrenched his eyes from the papers, his face a mix of bewilderment and silent anger. "Emily," he said in a low, uncomfortably steady voice, "prove to me that this is untrue." Emily shook her head wildly as she turned to face him. "It's untrue, of course. She gave Sophia a frantic look. "She's humiliating me with this. She's been envious all her life. Are you jealous?" Sophia cut in, her tone steady. "Of what, precisely? You snatched your fiancé? Is your marriage based on deception? Or is it Daniel's baby that you don't even know for sure?" The chamber echoed with a collective gasp. With a violent clink, their mother, Margaret Langley, slammed her wineglass onto the table. "Sophia, enough!" Her eyes blazed with the subdued rage of a woman whose meticulously built world was coming apart. "You're turning this family get-together into a comedy show." With a chilly smile, Sophia turned to face her mother. "Oh, I'm the issue now?" Still looking blankly at the papers in Daniel's hands, she gestured to him. "I never had an affair. I told my hubby the truth. I didn't deceive the one person who trusted me and trick everyone into believing. I was the ideal daughter." Margaret opened her mouth, but nothing came out. As if seeking a means of regaining control, their father, Charles Langley, sat rigidly in his chair, his gaze flitting between his daughters. Finally, with a clipped voice, he said, "Sophia, we've heard your argument. However, this is a personal issue." Sophia gave a little laugh. "Oh, it's private now?" She tilted her head and crossed her arms. When you all made fun of me behind my back, was it private? Did you whisper that Emily was the faithful daughter and I was the failure? Did you keep my infertility a secret from others in order to improve her appearance? Emily winced. Sophia's tone became piercing. No, you joked with me. And now that the joke is no longer humorous, you don't like it. A chair scraped the floor. Daniel's face was unreadable as he stood up suddenly. His voice was hollow as he mumbled, I need air. Pushing past the startled visitors, he turned aside and vanished through the patio doors. Emily stepped forward abruptly. Wait, Daniel. Sophia stepped in front of her. Give him up. Pure fury blazed in Emily's eyes. You made everything worse. Sophia refused to back down. No, Emily. You did. Emily was silent for the first time that night. Although the Langley estate was a site of heritage and luxury, the atmosphere tonight was one of shame, rage, and the weight of revealed facts. As visitors shifted uneasily and muttered to one another, Sophia stood close to the grand staircase. Some have already started to quietly go because they didn't want to be in the midst of a family breakdown. As the truth of their golden child's betrayal set in, her parents sat quietly at the dining table. At last, Margaret broke the silence. She mumbled, looking into her unfinished glass of wine. You ought to have dealt with this in private. Sophia laughed. Oh, you were aware? Margaret clenched her hand around the glass's stem, but she remained silent. She knew, of course. Sophia gave a disgusted shake of her head. I used to question why you never stood by me. Why, despite everything Emily did you always put her first? I understand now you recognize yourself in her. Margaret's gaze jerked upward. Sophia went on, her tone steady but firm. You told her that she could do anything she wanted as long as she looked flawless. And here we are now. Charles exhaled deeply and slowly. Sophia, you've made your point. Her father, who had been oddly silent during the commotion, was the one she turned to. You allowed this to occur, she remarked quietly. You gave Mom complete control. Emily got away with everything because of you. You pretended that I was the letdown while allowing them to ruin my engagement. The family's quiet leader had always been Charles Langley. Charles Langley was the steady hand behind the gleaming exterior, but for the first time he appeared, worn out tonight. He acknowledged, almost to himself, that she was supposed to be the strong one. You were never a concern for us. He trailed off, looking toward the patio doors, where Daniel had vanished, but Emily. Sophia gazed at him, bitterness mingling with her rage. I feel sorry. It had broken the image her parents had worked so hard to create throughout their lives. And they didn't care about who had been harmed along the road. They just cared about picking up the pieces. Sophia let out a sigh. Savor the mess you created. After saying that, she turned around and left. As more guests fled the devastation, Sophia heard the distant rumble of car engines and stepped out into the crisp night air. Daniel was standing at the far end of the garden, staring at nothing. When she noticed him, she yelled out, Daniel. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn. His voice was tight as he whispered, I knew she was selfish. However, this? He gave a halting laugh. I was making plans for our future. He shook his head and said, and she was. Sophia approached and paused next to him. You had a right to know. Finally, with a weary but appreciative grin, he faced her. This wasn't necessary for you to do. Silently, she exhaled. Yes, I did. Before Daniel eventually spoke, they stood silently for a long time. Well, what comes next? Sophia thought about the query. For you? She looked him in the eye. That's up to you. He sighed and nodded. And for you? With a tiny smile on her face, Sophia felt lighter than she had in years. I believe it's time for me to stop waiting for my family to love me as I deserve, she stated. After examining her for a while, Daniel nodded. You're worthy of better. Sophia's head cocked. You do too. Daniel grinned for the first time that evening, and Sophia felt liberated for the first time in a long time. Like an uncontrollable storm, the repercussions from the terrible family get-together swept through the Langley home. Sophia anticipated conflict. She had prepared herself for hushed charges and desperate attempts to repair the damage. Silence was the last thing she had anticipated. No calls, no emails, Her parents did not message her to apologize for causing a scene. Nothing. It was eerie. Her family had prospered through control and manipulation for many years. They manipulated events, set rules, and rewrote stories to suit their meticulously constructed persona. However, now that the truth was out in the open, many were turning back. They were uncertain about how to deal with someone whom they couldn't silence. Sophia was surprised to receive a call 3 days after the altercation. Daniel. She paused before responding. Daniel. A pause occurred. Then he spoke, softer than she had expected. I just wanted to say thank you, I guess. Leaning back in her chair, Sophia observed the flickering city lights outside her apartment window. For what purpose? For preventing me from living a lie. For a moment, she closed her eyes. How are things going with you? There was a soft chuckle. Not very good, he sighed. I thought Emily was my life partner for 2 years. I had to burn everything down because I created a future in my mind. Sophia gripped her phone more tightly. Daniel, she doesn't deserve you. There was one more moment of silence. And then, quietly, yeah, I'm beginning to see that. Her phone buzzed once more later that night. Langley, Margaret. She thought about ignoring it for a moment. However, curiosity prevailed. To respond, she swiped. Hey? Silence for a beat. Then her mother's voice, which Sophia had never heard before, was frail. I'm not sure where to begin. Sophia's lips curled into a thin line. It would be beneficial to offer an apology. A sigh. I am aware of your anger. That's an understatement. Margaret paused. Sophia, we never intended to cause you any harm. Sophia chuckled bitterly. Well, is that the official word for the Langley reputation? Would you like me to write a press release? Sophia, no, mother, she interrupted, her tone piercing. You intended to cause me pain. You always gave me the impression that I was unworthy. Each time, you disregarded my accomplishments because they weren't the kind of success you were looking for. Every time you gave Emily praise, you made sure I understood that I would never be her. Margaret faltered in her voice. I'm not sure how to fix this. Sophia inhaled and steadied herself. I doubt you are able to. They were silent for a long time. Your father wants to see you, he said softly. Sophia's mouth clenched. Why? He regrets what transpired. Her mouth was filled with a bitter taste. He feels remorseful about his discovery. He feels bad about hurting you. Sophia gave a head shake. He ought to have considered that years ago. One more pause. Margaret let out a breath. Just give it some thought. Sophia remained silent. She had the ability to leave for once. Furthermore, she wasn't certain she wanted to turn around. A scandal broke out in the Langley social circle the next week. The middle of the day saw Emily and Noah together once more. Sophia wasn't shocked. Emily had always thought she was above reproach. She believed that her parents would always tidy up after her actions. She believed she could make the most of any situation. However, there was no way to fix it this time. The rumors caught on like wildfire. Have you heard? For years, Emily cheated on Daniel by seeing her sister's fiancé. What about the infant? A DNA test is available. Nobody is certain if it belongs to Daniel or Noah. Sophia didn't need to take any action. For those who had based their lives on lies, the truth had a way of shattering them. What about Emily? She was falling apart. Her reputation, which had been impeccable, was in ruins. Overnight, her invites to private functions vanished. Those who had formerly admired her turned away, not wanting to be linked to the controversy. Not even their parents, who had always protected her, had spoken. Then one night, Sophia heard someone knock on her door. Emily was standing there when she opened it, unkempt, defeated. She was also terrified for the first time in her life. Sophia's arms were folded. I'm shocked you're here. Emily took a deep breath. Can we have a conversation? Sophia's head cocked. Speak? Or tell a lie? Emily winced. I made a mistake. Sophia gave a little chuckle. The year's biggest understatement. Tears filled her sister's eyes. I'm not sure what to do. Sophia looked at her for a long time. Emily was not wearing her mask. Without her meticulously manicured image, without the unwavering favoritism of their parents as a safety net, and Sophia saw her for who she truly was for the first time. Tiny. I'm afraid. And all alone, all alone. You ought to go, Sophia said. Emily's face fell flat. Please, Sophia. Sophia gave a head shake. You showed no concern when you excluded me. You showed no concern when you ruined my engagement, leaving me to rebuild my life on my own. You showed little concern as I was humiliated for years by our own parents. Emily broke down in tears. I apologize. Sophia let out a breath. You don't have my faith. Emily gave her a beseeching look. So what am I supposed to do? Sophia looked at her sister for a while. Try standing on your own for once, she urged calmly. She then shut the door behind her. Emily did not knock once more. Sophia left for the first time in their life. Furthermore, she didn't lose this time. A month later, Sophia was enjoying her coffee in a peaceful cafe when she heard a voice she recognized. Want me to accompany you? She raised her head. Daniel. His appearance improved. Lighter. She pointed to the seat on the other side. I wanted to know when I would see you again. He grinned. I figured I'd give you some time to celebrate your win. Sophia laughed. Daniel, it wasn't about winning. He arched an eyebrow. Was it not? She gave that some thought. Perhaps a bit. His eyes grew softer. Now what? Sophia sipped her coffee slowly, enjoying the peaceful liberation that comes with making her own decisions at last. Now? She grinned. I begin anew. As though he knew that better than anyone, Daniel nodded. Would you mind if I stayed for that? Sophia looked up at him. She wasn't looking back for the first time in a long time. She had her eyes on the future, and it was so satisfying. Yes, she replied with a smile. I believe I would enjoy that. Sophia Langley felt liberated for the first time in her life. Her family had kept her imprisoned for years, rarely seeing her in person. For years, Sophia had to struggle for every bit of accomplishment while living in the shadow of her sister, who had it all. Now, though, the truth had now come to light. Emily had lost everything, including their parents' unwavering support, her reputation, and her relationship with Daniel. As if feigning her non-existence would remove the controversy from their family name, their father, who had always been a practical businessman, had started discreetly removing himself from her, and their mother had stopped returning her calls. Sophia ought to have felt triumphant, but relief was all she could feel. Not because Emily was in pain, but rather because Sophia wasn't being ignored for the first time. She had emerged from the darkness. She also had no plans to return. Sophia was sitting in her favorite cafe 2 months after the controversy, going over a contract for a possible change in her job. She had received an offer of a senior role from a competing company, one of the largest marketing agencies in New York. It was all she had fought for. Everything her family used to brush off as irrelevant. Her phone buzzed as she was ready to sign. Her dad. Sophia took a long look at the screen before responding. Dad, he said in a stiff voice, as though the words were cruel. Your mother wants to see you. Sophia scowled. Why? She believes we ought to speak. Silently, Sophia exhaled. She refused to speak when I was the one excluded. A pause. Now she understands that, did she? Or was she simply trying desperately to mend the cracks in her idealized family image? Sophia took a while to respond. Then, at last, all right. I will visit tomorrow. Even though the Langley estate was still massive, Sophia entered with a proud demeanor. Her mother appeared much less composed than normal as she sat in the opulent living room with a glass of wine in her hand. Margaret Langley has always been flawless, elegant, and well-groomed. Now, though, she simply had a worn-out appearance. Sophia sat down on the other side of her. You desired to speak? Margaret let out a breath. Sophia, I made mistakes. Sophia laughed. That is an understatement. Her mother's hand gripped her glass more tightly. You were so hard to understand at all times. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Considering that I wasn't Emily, Margaret paused. Because you weren't as in need of us as she was. Sophia paused at that. With a sigh, Margaret swirled her glass of wine. Emily required ongoing care, continuous verification. I also handed it to her. However, you've always been resilient. You never made any requests. And her voice faltered as she trailed off. I allowed myself to think that you didn't require our assistance. Sophia's chest grew, constricted. That does not imply that it was painless. At last, Margaret looked directly into her daughter's eyes. I understand. Sophia took a swallow. For years, you misled me. While you gave Emily everything, you made me feel inadequate. Her mom turned her head away. I was mistaken. Sophia inhaled deeply. And what? Do you want my forgiveness now? Margaret was quiet for a while. Then I want to be better, said quietly. Sophia looked closely at her mother. There was no manipulation for once. There were no well-crafted remarks intended to coerce her into complying. Just sincere apologies. Sophia reclined. I'm not sure whether I can forgive you. Margaret gave a nod, as though anticipating it. I get it. Sophia got up. I need to catch a flight. Margaret blinked. Are you going? Sophia smiled a little. I'm accepting a position in London. It's a new beginning. Her mom's eyes grew wide. London? I'm picking something for myself for the first time. Margaret looked down at her hands and let out a breath. I hope it brings you joy. Sophia paused. Then, before she could question herself, she extended her hand and briefly covered her mother's with it. I believe it will. Sophia was sitting in her new office with a view of the Thames 2 weeks later. She had moved on from the past. She was no longer bound like chains by the expectations of her family. She had freedom. Her cell rang. Daniel sent a message. You look lovely in London. Drinks when I come over? Sophia grinned. She was right where she was supposed to be for the first time in a long time. She was also not turning around.